tell me, okay, so we are recording. We
Okay.
missed the first few minutes, but anyway, we're recording. Okay, guys, so again, let's try to make this as interactive as possible. When I run the Zooms, I do pay attention to who is unmuted. So if you want to jump in, just unmute yourself. I will see that you're unmuted, and then I'll kind of call on you. And then we'll try to keep this as interactive as we can. Okay, so again, a fairly standard summary pages. Hey, we got a door that's not latching properly. We've got a fireplace that's missing this, looks like a spark arrestor, some screens, carbon monoxide. Those carbon monoxide, let's just stop there. That's kind of an easy one. You know, we know we're doing carbon monoxide detectors. We know we're doing smoke detectors. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of a no-brainer. So again, below that is smoke detectors. What do we got? We got a shower head pipe that's loose. GFIs. Let's stop at GFIs for a minute. I tend to see agents a lot that will sit back and the only, which by the way, this may or may not be best practice, and you're going to find me using the term best practice a lot, but they tend to try to keep their requests for repairs that come out of a home inspection to what they might consider health and safety. Okay, so and sometimes they use that as a hammer. Hey, the seller has to do these items because it's health and safety. Okay, well that may or may not be accurate, but let's just for argument's sake say, hey, we got a problem with the GFI. I'm certainly we can probably agree that we might consider that a health and safety issue if we've got a problem with the GFI. Something's going on, the air gap with the dishwasher, common stuff, garbage disposal is not operating. Heaters did not respond to thermostat. I think buyers might think that's a little bit more important than maybe an air gap on a dishwasher. I don't know, maybe we'll see. Sub panels, okay, we got an electrical problem, we got some spliced and taped nuts. I would imagine a buyer might sit back and say, hey, there's some issues with that. So I'm at the risk of getting silence. So we've got, what do we got? 36 people here. Anybody want to be brave? How many of these items would you, well, actually, I'm assuming that you're going to ask for any of them. If you're representing this buyer, what do you put on your RR, if anything? Or do you basically put in a contingency removal saying the buyer's done their home inspection and the buyer's satisfied? So anybody want to jump in on that?
Hello.
Okay, we've got a couple. Let's start with Elizabeth.
All right.
You're first.
Okay, for me, I think I would want the carbon monoxide smoke detectors and the GFIs. I would offer those automatically because I just feel that I would, they need to, that's a necessity to me.
Okay. So let's deal with the carbon monoxide and the smoke detectors. We have a contractual obligation on the seller to basically make sure that that's done at close of escrow. So let's check. So good catch on that. We want to make sure that that's done.
Smoke detectors.
On the GFI though, so
Yeah, you don't have to be maybe that much.
yeah, I'm gonna unmute. I'm gonna remute.
I did. I got it.
So Elizabeth, I want to make sure I heard you say something. You said you would offer. What do you mean when you would offer those items? Are you suggesting that you would handle that as part of, you would just absorb that cost?
No, I would think that the seller would need to do those because is there not a law that they have to be in there?
There is.
The carbon monoxide and the smoke detectors. I don't know. And I'm thinking the GFIs, but if I were a buyer or if I were a buyer, I would want the GFIs anywhere there was close to water, of course, in case of this. And I think and the heater, maybe. I think maybe the heater too, because those are basic needs.
Yeah, let me stop you there. So let's pretend you didn't mention the heater and you said, hey, let's just make sure we get those contractual items taken care of in the GFI. So in other words, you've worked with this buyer. The buyer knows we're in a tight inventory market. The buyer really, really wants to buy this house. Maybe the buyer has a family member who's an electrician who looked at it and they're not as concerned with it. So you have, for lack of a better word, you have a very limited request for repair that comes out of this. Is there anybody who's unmuted that says, I'm asking for all of it?
No way.
Okay. All right. So I
say pay 50,000 over.
let me call on you guys just so we have Christine, why don't you jump in? What are you requesting?
Well, probably the only thing I would request is, the heater, because that's something that could be very expensive to replace. All the rest is, buckets change.
Understood.
Carbon monoxide or smoke detector, I would not even talk about it because we know by law, they have to be there before we close. So, the agent know, we know, maybe you can send an email to the agent and let them know, at the same time, when they come in to do whatever, they can, do the carbon monoxide and the smoke detectors. But, the heater could be something quite expensive. The sub panel, I'm sure there's a lot of alteration all the time, on panels and split wire, like,
Yep.
has it been working and how long was that done? I don't know. It'll be,
Okay, well, thanks for that. I gotta tell you, this is a very active, chatty group. I wasn't expecting to have 15 people unmute themselves. So,
Lance, can I go back? I want to go back to the smoke detector thing really quickly, though, and the
Sure.
carbon monoxide. It is not only contractual, like Lance indicated, but it is something that for all you listing agents out there, that you need to make sure that you're told your clients in advance of the home inspection and for sure the appraisal that the seller has. So when you look at the home, when you see the home, you make sure this should never really show up on an inspection report. This should have already been done, by the way, guys. So be aware of that. And buyer's agents, when you set up the inspection, remind the listing agent that you want those in play. That's all I had to say. Lance.
and the appraisal too, because the appraisers will notice it. And I have heard about appraisers coming back for a second appraisal because the smoke detectors were not there.
exactly. 100%. Hey, Gary, I'm going to call on you next, but let me put a little button on that. And Christina actually just did it. We're not really going to talk about an appraisal today as part of our inspection process. But to Vicky's point, you want to make sure all of this stuff is done before these inspectors get out there. I generally always kind of put the appraisal inspection at the top because let's face it, it should never show up on this type of a report because it should already be done. And I don't know what your guys' experience are, but appraisers, they just love to charge $100 to come out and do a reinspection, right? And if you've been doing this long enough, you will have had a transaction that will have a delayed closing because that appraiser hasn't signed off on a water heater strap, for example, kind of in that same category as the smoke detectors. Okay, Gary, why don't you jump in and then we'll take Gary real quick and then Tracy, and then and I see Betsy too. So let's just, everybody take 15, 20 seconds each, and then we're gonna move on. So Gary, go first. Gary, you're up.
Okay, a lot of this is, if the buyer's paying 50,000 over the asking price, they're getting real nitpicky. And, I don't know, some, like I said, the carbon monoxide, the smoke detectors, basically, I try to tell my client, you're buying this property as is, expect zero. And let's see what we can get from the seller to do. And, they go along with it. And, that sometimes they do it all, sometimes they do some, and sometimes they don't do any. They're hard-nosed, the sellers.
Yep.
But I mean, the carbon monoxide, the smoke detectors, obviously a garbage disposal not working, the heater, and then the wiring, electrical wiring, I would think that'd be legit.
Okay, so Gary, you and I are cut from the same cloth here when it comes to this type of a topic, and not necessarily because we're in a market where maybe buyers are paying $50,000 over asking, but what you said is exactly how I would prepare my buyer. So let's just role play this out for a second. If I'm your buyer and I've just paid $50,000 above asking to get my offer accepted, and this home inspection comes in, are you advising me to ask for any of it? Or are you just saying, hey, Lance, just, the Home Depot's down at the corner. And if you're concerned about the heater, why don't you prepare yourself to have a contractor come out with the seller's permission to look at that? Or are you saying, well, we're going to ask for certain things, but if you get nothing, you need to be prepared to move forward and close this escrow. So what conversation do you have with the buyer? Are you submitting an RR, or are you telling the buyer, you know what, this is relatively minor stuff, and I know we can get into some trouble with that. We're saying it's minor. Well, what if the heater needs to be replaced? And what if the electrical is more severe? So we need to be careful with that. So what are you suggesting to the buyer on this? Are you writing an RR, or are you not?
Yeah, so I'm definitely writing an RR. you know, but I prepare them. I said, basically, it's the plumbing, heating, and electrical systems, the foundation, things that, you know, that are deal breakers, really. I mean, that, you know, the garbage disposal, really, it's, you can ask, you know, but that, you know, like the heater, it's got to have a operating heater, and you know, they might have, especially who you're working with. If there's somebody that's bought and sold them numerous times, this is not a big deal. But if you're working with a first-time buyer, uh, they think it's you know, a carte blanche that they're going to do these things, and you got to prepare them.
Yep.
And like I said, I try to tell them, you probably aren't going to get it all. People will see what seller's willing to offer, if anything, but be prepared that he may say absolutely zero.
Yep, fair enough. Okay, hey Betsy, why don't you go next, and then we'll let Tracy finish this page and we'll move next. What do you got?
Okay, so I'll keep it as quick as possible. So normally when I go into this, I make sure my client is aware that no home is perfect. Even new builds aren't perfect. So something is going to show up. And when you look at it, you need to make sure that you value on what's important to you. Anything that I for sure ask to be done, I do it based off of appraisal, heating source, smoke detector, which was kind of touched on. Beyond that, what I do is I recommend to my client to then get a price to have the items that are important to them completed. And the reason being is when you have something like that in writing, you're able to use that price point to negotiate further. Sometimes when a dollar value is not associated with fixing something, people have different opinions on how they're willing to move forward. So I get that done. And then I usually also advise more towards items being completed after the close of escrow by utilizing the R&R for a price reduction or a buyer credit. And the reason being is I've been in escrow numerous times where someone has asked for something to be completed and it's not done correctly, or it's done so shitty that we then argue and then almost fall out of escrow because of the lack of quality work. And so that's usually the process that I go for in regards to requests for repairs.
Okay, I would suggest, I'm going to use the words practice again. And Betsy, in my world, that is best practice all the way around. Okay. A couple of things, and I might miss one or two of them. And Tracy, I haven't forgotten you. Tracy will give you a chance.
It's all good.
On this, but a couple of things. However you do it before an RR is submitted, or as you're discussing with the buyer, I do think it's a good idea to sit down with the buyer and try to put some dollar values on these things. Okay, what are these going to be? Sometimes that can delay the process because it may require another inspection or whatever it happens to be. But sitting down with the buyer and putting a dollar value on these, I think, is really, really important. Another thing that Betsy had said, which I completely agree with, is let's just say for example, it's the heater, or maybe we're talking things that are a little bit different. The buyer's not happy with paint or carpet or roof or whatever it happens to be. I get really, really nervous when a buyer and seller agree in escrow to do a repair. We are going to fix this particular item. We are going to replace the carpet. We are going to fix the roof. We're going to fix the heater, air conditioner, whatever it happens to be, because the seller needs, by the contract. I'm paraphrasing, Vicki, you can correct me because you probably have it memorized. But a lot of times the seller has the ability to do these repairs themselves, as long as it's done in a workmanlike manner. Or maybe we agree that a contractor is going to do it. So we've had contractor ABC do it, and they go out and they don't do the job in a fashion that is acceptable to the buyer. It's done. Things are working. The roof has been fixed, or the air conditioner is now blowing cold, but the buyer goes out and takes a look at it, and then they're not satisfied. Their expectation was going to be newer or new, as opposed to repaired, or maybe repaired in a little bit less of a fashion that they had expected. And then another thing that I completely agree with, I think if I heard Betsy correct, and Drew's sitting right next to me, he's the king of this. If we get a home inspection in and we get a request for repairs, we will not, as the listing agent, we will not address the request for repairs until we actually get the appraisal done. We want the appraisal in for a couple of reasons. We don't want to agree on doing, let's suppose we agree on all of these things, and then the appraisal comes in, and part of the appraisal inspection, there's additional items that, oh, no, well, wait, the buyer didn't see this or the home inspector missed it, but the appraiser wants something done. So we kind of like to do one negotiation on those, just take one bite at the apple and deal with all of it at once. Of course, if the appraisal comes in clean with no repairs, then that's even better. Okay.
And Lance, I know we've got Tracy waiting to talk, since we talked about dollars. There is a comment that says, always best to ask for a credit at close of escrow. Just so that you let me know if I'm off base here, but a credit would be towards buyer's closing costs. If it's cash,
Repairs.
you can reduce the price. Yes, you can give a credit with cash, but with when it's financed, the lender does not take kindly to credit. So it has to be towards their buyer's closing costs, and you need to do addendum as well.
You know, to that point, and poor Tracy is
Tracy,
super
you're so patient. Thank
patient.
you.
Oh my gosh. Well, guess what, Tracy? We're going to make you wait for another 30 seconds.
That's good.
So to Vicky's point on that, and again, by the way, anything that affects the contract, anything that affects financing, anything that affects a change of terms in the contract financially, before I ever agree to do anything, I always want to talk to the lender who's doing the loan for the buyer. Go back to the lender and say, hey, you know, this is what's been going on. We're negotiating $1,000 credit, whatever we want to call it, from the seller to the buyer for the following reasons. Sometimes I see agents start drafting this crazy language with crazy dollar amounts. They've negotiated it for weeks. They get an amendment or an addendum signed to the agreement. It works its way over to escrow, and then it works its way to the lender, and then it works its way to the underwriter. And then for the very first time, the lender or the underwriter is saying, well, what is this? What is this? What do you mean they agreed to a $20,000 credit in lieu of a new roof? Okay. Now, all of a sudden, you've got an underwriter sitting back and saying, what's wrong with the roof?
Right.
And you structure this. Okay. So Tracy, God willing, you're going to get us past page 1. So finish this up, and then we're going to move on.
Actually, it was all good. I personally would maybe have an electrician come out. That's just my personal, I'm a brand new agent, by the way, so I haven't done any of this yet. But
Welcome.
thank you. But I just with the sub panel, the panel, and the heater, I personally would just maybe recommend having an electrician come out. And then I have a question, like for the carbon monoxide detector and the smoke detector, if you're actually representing the seller, I mean, can you even just install that yourself, have them in your car, put them up so it's not even an issue? Or
Well, the reality is everybody on this call who's done this for any period of time probably has some smoke detectors and a carbon monoxide detector in your trunk, and you probably have installed them yourself. Is there somebody here that's going to say, hold on, wait a minute, you're now exposing yourself to some liability? Did you put in the right one? Did you put it in the right place? I'm sure there's some concern with that. I think in practice, we all at some point in time will put in a carbon monoxide detector or a smoke detector, but you got to be careful with that. And again, if I want to be super cautious and I want to put my loss mitigation hat on, does anybody really know where to put the carbon monoxide detector?
That's the best question of the day, Lance.
I mean, seriously, I mean,
No, it's true.
do you really know where to, and I'm not joking, because depending upon what city, county, or local ordinance you're in, you would think that there would be like a uniform code from the fire department or local that says, oh, that you put it here and you put it there and you put it so many inches off of this and that. And I have yet to see that as a uniform. If you talk to CAR about that, I believe the CAR legal, I may be mistaken, but if anybody's done this, I think CAR legal will actually refer you to local building and safety. To say, okay, you need to check with your local municipality on if they have a specific place where they want that carbon monoxide detector installed. Okay, I see a couple other people unmuted, but I think we got to press on because we're 26 minutes in and we have a lot of other stuff to do. I will tell you though, everything that we've discussed on this, I think is reasonable. Okay, I don't think anybody here, and to kind of finish with Tracy, since she was so patient and sounds like one of the newer agents here. I will tell you, following your gut is generally will probably serve you pretty well. you're a little concerned about the electricity issue. I want to make sure that that gets handled. I don't disagree with any of that. One sidebar on that though, and Vicky, correct me if you feel differently. This is also what I consider best practice. Is if you're going to recommend ultimately that, hey, the buyer, which by the way, we haven't even gotten to this, I can guarantee you somewhere in this report, this inspection is going to call out for further inspection. Okay. So as we go further down here, matter of fact, let's see how long it takes to find one. Okay, so this is a limited, we probably don't even have to go to any farther than this. This is a limited inspection. I can guarantee you somewhere in this paragraph says you need to go get a further inspection. You need to go get the electrician. You need to get the HVAC professional out there. So word of caution, buyers, you are not to send anybody, buyer's agents, excuse me, you are not to send anybody out to do further inspections without getting approval from the listing agent and ultimately from the seller. Okay. So even though ultimately you may agree, yes, we would like to get further inspection. Can I, I call the listing agent, yeah, sure, fine, send out your contractor. But you don't want to just, send anybody out with, and I'll give you a real live example, which happens far too often. Let's suppose somewhere in this inspection, it says we have some discoloration under the kitchen sink. It could be mold. This inspection is outside of the scope, and we recommend that the buyer obtain a certified, mold inspection. The name is escaping me, the people that do the air samples and all the rest of that sort of stuff to see what type of mold we have in. That's a hot button. People, what's that?
Water remediation.
Yeah, water. Drew's over here barking in my ear, water remediation or whatever it happens to be. Okay, that may be something ultimately that a buyer and seller agree to do, but you as the buyer's agent should not be sending out mold inspectors to a seller's house without their permission. Okay, you need to get their permission before you do that. And again, let's use this as another obvious example. Is let's take it into one that maybe is a little bit more common. We have a termite inspection. We don't like the termite inspection. All right. Seller says, I've got a termite inspection. It's for local treat, $400. Buyer looks at it and says, wow, it just seems like there's more serious than that. The buyer unilaterally goes out and orders a second termite inspection, doesn't tell anybody. Okay. They now get a termite inspection. That second inspection comes back and it says this house needs to be fumigated, right? So we go from a $400 local treat to a $2,000 or $3,000 fumigation. Everybody with me? Buyer's agent turns that into the seller, listing agent, and says, oh, I want the fumigation. I don't want the local treat. Listing agent says, what is this? Whose report is? Oh yeah, I just went ahead and ordered it. Right? Now what? And what happens to that report now? That $2,000 fumigation that nobody ordered or nobody asked to be ordered. Does that live with the party?
Goes in the trash.
Goes in the trash. Who said that? That's actually, that's hilarious. No, it doesn't go in the trash.
It's
I don't
material-
know.
It's a material fact of the home. It has to be acknowledged.
People go through the trash. That needs to go into the fire. Okay, that needs to, no, this is the deal though. You can't, what the answer is you don't have a possession, you have a report in your possession. And let's suppose this deal blows up. Okay. And now we have buyer number 2 that comes in and termite is on the table. Okay. And now we have 2 reports. We have one that's a local treat for 400 and we have one that's a fumigation for 3,000.
So you have to show them both.
Correct.
Yes.
You have to show them both. Okay. By the way, so I've had this happen sometimes with sellers. I've had sellers who have gotten cute where, I send out a termite guy, somebody that I know and trust, and it's a fume and it's a $2,500 fume. And I go, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. Lance, let's get a second opinion. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We'll get a second opinion, but I want you to prepare yourself. That second opinion, that might come back with the fume at $4,000.
Right.
We're giving both reports to the buyer, both of them. And of course, which one is the buyer going to want? Buyer wants the $4,000 fume because it must be better. It's more expensive, therefore it's better. So all those reports go to the seller. And again, I didn't prepare for this maybe in the way I should. Vicky, help me out. Is it page 1 of the transfer disclosure statement where the seller basically has the box in there that says, I'm providing this as my transfer disclosure statement, but I believe the question is something to the effect that, oh, but by the way, I have the following reports in my possession.
Correct.
Okay. I have a mold
It's on front, on the first page, yeah.
on the first page, top third of the page. It's before you get to all the check boxes, right?
Right.
So I now have this mold inspection that I didn't want on a prior escrow that canceled, but it's in my possession. The new buyer number two, hasn't even asked for anything. They don't care. They want the property as is. I'm not even going to do an inspection. I'm waiving everything. I have a mold inspection in my hand. Okay, you've got to provide it. Okay. Okay. So let's carry on. So again, we've got limited inspections. They're going to request some more stuff. Let's just kind of go through here and see if we can find something interesting. We've got our overview. Again, kind of getting back to the stuff we had talked about before. Make sure utilities are on for these things. Make sure water heaters are strapped. Make sure all of those basic things that we can prepare for are prepared for. If you've got a seller who's a little bit of a pack rat, or they're moving and there's boxes and stuff all over the place, I always try to prep them and say, hey, let's try to get this stuff out of here, because ultimately, if you've got a room that's filled to the top with boxes and it can't be inspected, you're going to get a report that's basically incomplete, and somebody's going to want to come back. Basic things, let's try to get those things handled. Very common, of course, for inspectors to take pictures. The technology now is super, super clean. And then you start to get pictures that start to look like, I thought I saw some in here that have like red arrows. This is maybe a little bit of a different inspection. Looks like this guy's pointing to things and holding that stuff out, and what he has and what he doesn't have. There was an inspection report I was looking at previously, which was kind of nice. It would have like a red circle around this GFI or this surge or this circuit tester, and it would say, okay, hey, the circuit tested positive. Or if it had an orange light, it would say, okay, the ground is incorrect. So these things I think are helpful, especially for consumers. Anything on this one, Vic, that jumped out at you specifically that maybe we wanted to point out?
No, not really. I can tell you what they ended up doing is they did the electrical work on this, and then they did give a credit towards closing costs for the remainder of what was asked for on this report.
Okay. Which again, it sounds like a good solution to me. I think I have another screen here. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Someone give me a thumbs up. Win home inspection. Okay, this is another inspection that was done. I don't know when. I'm assuming fairly recently. This particular inspection, it's the same kind of thing. Let me get to the money shot here. So again, we've kind of got our summary of what's going on. This particular one, it had some lighting issues, had a deck that was cracked. This inspector, this is what I was talking about on the photos. So let's just focus on this for a minute, and then we'll move on to something else. So this is very, very common stuff. Okay. Home inspector sees it. We've got a crack here on the concrete. What caused it? Is it a tree? Is it just old? Was it unreinforced? Is it a trip hazard? Okay. Is it health and safety? Whatever it happens to be. So these are those type of things that you make a decision. Okay. So let's make a decision. And again, let's try to just run a little bit quicker. Let's take no more than 2 minutes on this. Who on the call is asking for some sort of remediation on these concrete cracks? Anybody? And saying this needs to be handled? It's an absolute must. I see, Christine, you apparently are just chatty Kathy today. Christine, what do you got to say? You're unmuted. Christine? Maybe you just forgot to mute yourself again. Elizabeth, you're up. Go.
Yeah, well, and I'm seeing these cracks in different spots. Might it be land movement?
Okay, which means what? Means another inspection. So now we have to, okay, so let's stop right there. Okay, so you went in a totally different direction, totally reasonable direction. You now have a home inspection report that has multiple cracks in the concrete in multiple areas. Is it a bad pour? Is it tree roots, or do we have some land movement? Okay, I'm your buyer. You just suggested the earth is moving.
Should I not?
I believe you have to go with your heart here on these things, but at the same time, you have to have the rest of the conversation. Okay, so and I'm going to ask you guys a question that I know the answer to. I'm really good at that. So So what would be the recommendation to answer your question? Is it land movement? So what kind of additional test or inspection do we need? Anybody? Who wants to
Cement
try?
contractor?
Well, that they're not.
Foundation.
Well, their contractors generally are, they might go out and say, yeah, the cement is low density and it's a tree root. The foundation guys who fix the foundation, they'll know how to fix it. They won't necessarily tell you that the soil is moving. So we just don't play grab bag here. You're going to need to get a geological inspection, a soils engineer. Okay. And they will come out, and depending upon what they see, they'll start drilling holes in the ground. Okay.
Ah.
And I've done these a couple of times. Right off the bat, you're talking 5 Gs. Okay. And again, are we prepared for that? Now, this is one of these things, do as I say, not as I do, or maybe vice versa. I'm going to assume that this is a single family residential neighborhood. Okay. I'm going to assume when this was built, the builder came in and did everything that they were supposed to do properly, compacting the soil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I will tell you, generally speaking, when you have a soils engineer come out to a single family residential neighborhood, that's not anything special. It's not on a hill. It's not on a slope. It's just kind of in the regular neighborhood. They kind of look at you a little sideways and say, do you really want to spend $5,000? You know?
No.
You've got some concrete that's cracked here, which, by the way, someone said foundation. Based on my
On the
experience,
outside.
if I didn't see foundation issues, I would just say, you've got some tree roots and some cracks. Now, if this crack is going towards the foundation and there's a 5-inch raise in the foundation of the house, well, it's probably a different issue. But hey, just be prepared. Those inspections are extremely expensive. Having said that, for those of you that have any familiarity with Moreno Valley, there's a community up in Hidden Springs, which is a residential, 700-800 houses, stick built, just looks like any other neighborhood in the area. And I think there's at least 4 different lots in that neighborhood that to this day are dirt. Because guess what? They built houses on them. They had a problem. They tore those houses down. The builder bought them back. And to this day, 30 years later, no one's ever built a house on them, and they never will. And it's just in a regular residential neighborhood. Who would have thought? Okay. Well, in that particular case, there was a problem. So at any rate, when you call out stuff like that, same thing with stucco cracks. I don't know if on this particular inspection, they call out stucco cracks. It's very common when you go look at a stucco and you got a window framed or a door, you'll see a crack that goes off the top corner of the stucco. Buyers get concerned about that. Oh my gosh, there's a crack. What does that mean? Do we have an earthquake? Is the house settling? Depending upon the width of the crack, the length of the crack, may or may not be concerns. So again, let's not get too hung up on this. Let's see what else we got here. Looks like they circled, there's some moisture. We got laminate flooring. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. Let's take a minute on this. Laminate flooring, moisture related damage due to laminate flooring. What is moisture related damage? So what's underneath that laminate flooring, folks? Anybody?
Mold,
Oh,
The M word.
water.
yes. Okay. We're not allowed to use the word mold. in
Oh,
my-
oops.
We have what we refer to, and I'm not being cute, although I am being a little bit cute. I advise my agents, and by the way, this is not my advice. This is advice that I had received from Fannie Mae many, many, many years ago. And they're legal beagles. I figured if it's good enough for Fannie Mae's attorneys, it's good enough for me. Said, we are not qualified to determine whether or not this is mold, black mold, toxic black mold, common household mold. So they always, scolded us and said, until you have it inspected, it's discoloration. Okay. So this is a bad photo, but let's pretend we're looking underneath the kitchen sink, and it seems obvious that there's something going on under here. There's been some water stains. Maybe we see even a little bit of black something on the surface of the drywall. We as agents tend to do what, frankly, kind of common folks tend to do. There's mold under there. And of course, it's toxic black mold. Okay. It's discoloration. Okay. There's discoloration, or yes, there appears to be a water leak. It's toxic mold. It may be toxic mold. I don't know that. It's discoloration.
Out of all the molds that are out there, there are only out of the thousands of molds, there's only a small percentage that are toxic.
Correct. Correct. And I don't know how to pronounce it. If anybody knows how to pronounce it's something to the effect of sticky stacky borealis. So I'm pretty close. So if anybody can actually pronounce that, unmute yourself and then you will get the gold star of the day. So, but let's take just a second here and talk about this moisture related damage underneath the laminate flooring. It would be a very common issue for a buyer or an agent to be concerned about that. What do we want? We need additional investigation. We need to make sure there is no mold underneath that flooring. This is one of those things that could really spin off into a completely crazy, but maybe fully legitimate negotiation between the buyer and the seller. Because in this case, guess what? We're not going to know anything until what? Until we pull up the flooring, right?
Mhm.
We pull it up. And then what does that mean? Oh my gosh, now we got to go that way. Oh, and it looks like it's going underneath the wall and it's going into the drywall. So I would just suggest be very, very careful on these. And I don't mean careful to imply that we sugarcoat it, we don't address it. So if there's anything that I say in today's session that you might get the impression from me that, gosh, it seems like Lance is trying to minimize this, or I'm trying to ignore this. I'm not, okay? But I just do think we need to be careful. What do we got here? We got a cap that needs to be done. Looks like we've got an air gap underneath this sink that needs to be dealt with. Air gap normally goes to the dishwasher. Let's see what else we have here. If there's anything interesting. Otherwise, I think we're going to leave the home inspection. Oh, asbestos. Okay, so I thought asbestos. Okay, this particular one, there was no asbestos noted. Again, be careful when you have reports that think there may be asbestos. Further investigation. There may be lead. Further investigation. There may be mold. Further investigation. Because at the end of the day, that's really what that means. Now, in this particular inspection, I don't think I'm not even sure what report I'm on. This inspector saying, hey, we don't even do that. You know, we don't even test for that. So you have an older house, you know, the what is it, 1979, I think it is, with the lead-based paint.
78.
78. And pretty much every house on the planet, probably certainly built into the 60s and 70s, all have asbestos in it somewhere. Asbestos was like, you know, the thing for construction and building materials, especially in these older houses. So be careful with those. Okay.
And the other thing, Lance, I'd like to note, because very often these are home inspectors and they're not certified. They do not really have the type of training or certification that a appraiser does, or even a roofer may have, or a plumber. So, you know, be aware that they don't know for sure when they're looking at this, and they ask for additional inspection of a professional. Sometimes when you get the plumber out there, there's no problem with it.
Yep.
You know, they're just recommending that you do that, or the roofer out there, and no, it's not leaking, it's an old leak or whatever. So just be aware that this is not the all encompassing report, and that you need to do some further investigation.
Yeah, and I would tell you, in my experience with most home inspectors, and I know some good ones. Matter of fact, this is Win Home Inspections. It's a good guy. I've known Tony for a long time. I recommend him. But if I'm being honest, before Tony was doing home inspections, he was a farmer's insurance agent. One day I looked up to call him. I said, hey, Tony, let me refer you to somebody for insurance. He says, oh, I sold my business. I'm doing home inspections now. How long you been doing that? I went online. I got it. And again, I'm slandering poor Tony, but that's kind of the deal. Is I went in. He's not a general contractor. Okay, they're not roofers. And by the way, I am a general contractor. I've had a general contractor's license for 15 years on the property management side. You ask me something to do with electricity, I have no idea. I have no idea. What do you mean, man? You're a general contractor. I thought you had to have expertise in all these areas. No, I don't know. I don't know anything about electricity. I mean, I know enough to know that I don't know anything. I don't know anything. So Vicki, that's a great point on the home inspectors. And some of them tend to be a little bit more alarmist the way they write their stuff. I mean, that is what it is. So we have to be careful with that. Okay, I don't see anything. Well, actually, I'm not looking in the chat box, but I don't see anybody else unmuted. So let's do this. Let's take a look at a little bit different inspection here. So I got a couple others. I apologize if I'm making you dizzy. So what do we got here? Okay, so this is a septic inspection. So let's just deal with septics real quick. One thing I would advise, and if you guys have different experience, by all means, let me know. But, the way sometimes contractors write reports, you will know automatically that this is not going to be sufficient to get past an underwriter or to get past an individual that says, hey, I asked for a roof certification, or I asked for a septic certification, or whatever it happens to be. So just be careful with that, because there's a difference between, hey, let me get the septic inspected and let me get the septic certified. And I find that a lot of agents, especially some of the newer agents, they might get the lingo confused a little bit, and they think by, hey, I've asked the seller to pay for a septic inspection, and they did. Guess what? I did an septic inspection. It was $500. Here's your report. Oh my gosh, I need a brand new pit and I need new leach lines, and it's going to cost $9,000. Yeah, but you didn't ask for that. You didn't ask for it to be certified. I want it inspected, and I want all correction work necessary to certify this property. You could use the same thing with a roof inspection or whatever it happens to be. Matter of fact, I have a copy of a roof inspection. Okay, come and give me a thumbs up. Can you see my screen?
Got it.
Okay, Santa Center Roofing. Okay, so this is a roof inspection report. This is not a certification. Okay, so all that this, if I was selling this house up in Bakersfield and the buyer said, hey, I want an inspection report. Okay, great, here it is. Well, wait a minute. This, without reading it, let's just go down to the money shot down to the bottom. You guys can see my lower left-hand corner. Estimated life expectancy, 0. Okay, so what this roof inspector is saying is this roof is done. Okay, so in other words, this particular inspector, this roof will not certify. Okay, lenders, buyers on occasion, hey, I want a 1-year roof certification. I want a 2-year roof certification. I want a period of time. And again, for those of you that are brand new, basically what that means is, in this particular case, San Jacinto Roofing, if they go out and they certify this thing, if this thing springs a leak during that 1-year window, 2-year window, they're on the hook. Doesn't mean they're getting a brand new roof, but they're on the hook to fix that area. Hey, it leaked over the kitchen. Well, guess who's going to fix that leak over the kitchen for the next 2 years? So just be careful in the contracts when you're asking for those type of things. Same thing can be said about a termite. Now, I know we remove, which, by the way, Vic, I'm curious, what's your, I think we've talked about this, but it happened a few years ago. What's your feelings about when CA, because I know you were on standard forms back then when this happened, when they took the termite, the boilerplate language, and they took it out of the contract. I had some very specific feelings about that at the time. Was that an improvement, or was that a problem in your mind?
I understood the logic behind it, because they just wanted to treat it like the septic is separate and all the other inspections, home inspection, all of that. It's just another inspection, but somehow it was a part of our contract for so long. They took years to try to get it out, but there was a lot of conflict and controversy over it. Lance, I don't know how you felt about it, but a lot of people still wanted that in. I don't know, it's because they knew, they were comfortable with it. But I have to tell you, they took it out of the contract, but 75 to 80% of all offers I get put in the other, they want that report in section 1 clearance. So I don't know that they accomplished what they really set out to do.
Right. And this is a sidebar to that conversation that Vicki just put on the table. But, as I recall, Vic, that was a Northern California, Southern
Correct.
California
Correct.
development. In Northern California, their practice generally was, it wasn't a big deal. They just didn't seem to be overly concerned on the buy side or the sell side. And I'm talking realtors. They didn't seem overly concerned about having it in there. In Southern California, that was just what we did. We focused on it, and we checked the box, and we want this, and we want an inspection, and we want section 1, or we want section 2, and buyer's going to pay, seller's going to pay. It was what we did. So when that came out, I know a lot of the agents in Southern California, certainly my agents, it felt very odd. And a lot of us felt, I don't know that I felt this way, but a lot of local Southern California agents felt that we were almost doing a disservice to the buyer we were taking out this protection that was kind of built into the contract, and now we made it optional. Northern California's argument, which was Vicky's argument, it's no different than a roof inspection. It's no different than any other inspection, a septic inspection. If you want it, ask for it. So anyway, just be careful on the contract though, because make sure you know what you're asking for. And if you're on the listing side, and you have an offer, Vicky writes an offer and she wants I want a roof certification, a 2-year roof certification. I want a termite report and clearance, I want a septic report and certification that the septic is functioning properly. And she submits that to me as the listing agent. If I don't already have all those reports in the file, I have no idea what that's going to cost my seller. I know what the inspections cost. We get a termite inspection for $50, $100. We get a septic inspection for $500. We get a roof inspection for, I don't know, $300, $400, $500. But that doesn't tell us, oh, wait a minute. Oh, now they all came with an extra $5,000 a piece. So be careful not to obligate your seller to unknown expenses. Because if the seller agrees to that, and the next thing you know, these inspections come in, it's like, okay, are you ready to cut the check to certify all these things? So be super, super careful with that. And then my suggestion, if depending upon where the roof inspections are coming from, and I would suggest this almost with every one of these things, I'm sure there's one or two where it doesn't apply. If you represent the buyer or the seller for that matter, before any of this gets done, I want to talk to the lender. I just want to talk to the lender. It says, okay, we're negotiating a roof certification. Do you have an opinion on this? Okay. Is your underwriter, more importantly, does your underwriter have an opinion on this roof certification? Will they accept a 12-month, 24-month? What will they accept? Or if we're going to do a credit like we talked about for earlier, how do we structure that? How do we word that? I think we got a few more minutes. I think I have a termite inspection. Here's a termite inspection that was done from Cruise. This is a fairly extensive termite inspection. It's a complete report. And by the way, I don't know how you feel about this, Vic, but and I'm going to be careful saying the word expert, but and this is one of the reasons we're doing these training classes. I think you as a real estate professional have an obligation at a minimum to be able to read these reports and at least give a basic explanation to your client as to what they mean. To me, it's unacceptable. Not that you should not be doing this, but if your answer to any question on a termite report is, here, let me refer you over to the termite inspector. Let me refer you over to the septic guy. I think you at least need to be able to say, okay, well, this is kind of what this means, and this is where we are in the contract. I'll use, for example, Section 1, Section 2. Vicki had mentioned a moment ago, had mentioned Section 1 termite report items. I think it would be best practice if we as an industry knew the difference between Section 1 and Section 2. Need to know that. Now, ultimately, you may refer your client back to the termite inspector for a more detailed explanation. But this is a report, for example. Let me go to the meat and potatoes of it. Got a whole bunch of findings. And oops, sorry about that. And as you see, Section 1, Section 1, Section 1, Section 1. So you just see a variety of Section 1. So the basic definition of Section 1 is you have active wood destroying organisms at this property, which, by the way, it's not always termites. Okay. Dry rot, fungus, that's a wood destroying organism. There's no termites. There's not a termite in sight, but you've got a patio cover that has fungus or dry rot, kind of got the mushrooms growing, and it's just obvious that things have created some problems. That's a Section 1 item. So in the past, and again, this is where we have to be careful. So if you newer agents are dealing with some older agents, when the termite was built into the contract, it was very clear, well, who's paying for Section 1 and who's paying for Section 2, and why is there a difference? Okay. Well, in the old days, the seller generally paid in Southern California, we paid for Section 1 repairs. There's an active infestation of some sort of wood destroying organism, which, by the way, just to go back to the top of this for some of you guys that are new, we call this thing a termite report at the top. It's not called a termite report. Wood destroying pests and organism inspection. Okay, we just have kind of thrown that title away, and we've just dubbed it a termite report. Well, it's a wood destroying pest. Could be certainly defined as as a termite. By the way, anybody up here ever sell a house up in Big Bear area? Well, they got some things up there on the mountains called carpenter ants. Okay. And they're just gigantic ants, and they'll do twice as much damage as any termite I've ever seen. They just eat wood, and they don't hide in the wood, and they don't hide underground. They're just crawling all over the patio, and they're just tearing up that patio. Carpenter ants are a wood destroying pest. And again, there's a whole different treatment and remedy for carpenter ants. So at any rate, section 1 is current active infestation. Section 2 are things that could lead to an active infestation. So maybe you've got a piece of wood on the fence that's right up against the house, and that piece of wood is going into the ground, and there's no barrier between that and the property. There's no termites, there's no fungus, there's no dry rot, but a termite inspector could and probably would call that out as a section 2 item. No current infestation, however, conditions that could lead to an infestation at a later date. So again, a little bit of basic knowledge about how to read a termite report, what the difference between section 1 and section 2 is. We haven't even talked about an appraisal. I mean, probably should have been the first one we put up. I mean, guys, read your appraisals, read your appraisers, go to the condition sheet that says what repairs need to be done. We had one that came up recently on a square footage problem. Okay. The MLS said the tax records were X amount of square feet. That's what we published. The appraisal was published with a significantly different square footage amount. They're always going to be different, by the way, right, Vic?
And less generally, right? It was less.
Yeah. So just remember, especially if you newer agents out there, let's just suppose the tax records say 1,822 square feet, and it just, this looks and feels like 1,822. And the appraiser comes out. If you're new, you might expect the appraiser to come back, and you might expect it to say 1,822. Okay. It never says 1,822 because they actually throw a tape measure around it. It could be 1,830, it could be 1,790, or whatever. So, and generally we don't really give that much of a second thought. But we just had one recently where, and this happened after close of escrow, the published square footage in the county, on the county tax records, I don't know what, it was a bigger house. It was like 5,200 square feet. We referenced the public records as the square footage on the MLS. Escrow closes, appraisal comes in at value, no harm, no foul, everything's good. The buyer apparently after close of escrow decided to go look at the appraisal, and the square footage on the appraisal was like 1,400 square feet less. Okay. Now all of a sudden we got a problem. Okay. Now again, value didn't change. And there was some concern. I still don't even know what the answer is. This is an ongoing issue. What happened? I mean, the house, by the way, is larger, but there was a question as to, is that particular portion of the house fully permitted? And apparently the appraiser felt that there was an issue with it, mentioned it on the appraisal. Nobody read it. The only thing that we looked at on the appraisal, actually, I don't even know that anybody looked at it. We got the phone call. You guys get this phone call before? Hey, is the appraisal done? Yeah. Any problems? No, it's in at value. Thank you. Boom, on to the next deal. Okay. Well, this is one of those that I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. Now it came in at value. Did the buyer have an obligation to read it before they accepted it and closed? They removed appraisal contingencies. Yeah. I'm sure their attorney will have a different feeling about that. Their attorney will turn to us and say, well, did you actually read the appraisal? And did you point it out to the buyer that there's a significant square footage discrepancy on the appraisal to what the tax records say, irrespective of value? And the reality is, the answer, the best I can tell is we did not do that. Our agent did not do that. So I guess since we're pushing up at 1 o'clock, a little past 1. So let's start with the basics. Read your reports. Okay. Just like we're supposed to read our prelims and we read our escrow instructions and we read our contracts. I think if you kind of read these things to begin with, you'll probably be off to a good start. So we're past 1. Anybody got any closing comments or some questions we can take this thing home with, or where are we? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to give us some words of wisdom. We're all wisdomed out.
No.
Elizabeth, go ahead, Elizabeth, you're up.
I would say that, in my experience so far, I need to read everything everything, read everything.
100%.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good. You're going to be a good agent.
Thanks.
No, it sounds so elementary, but you know, Vicky does contract classes and training all the time, and I do as well. And there's nothing more frustrating when, and I don't mind them in training, and that's what training's for, but when we're in a real deal and there's something going on and an agent starts to question, well, we're going to do this, and what about this, and what about this? And I'm like, well, yeah, it's on page 2, paragraph 4. Everything you're asking about is in, it's boilerplate. It's boilerplate in the contract. And yeah, you bite your tongue, but what you really want to do is you just want to shake them by the lapels and say, have you actually read the contract? You know, and the sad news is, you know, if you're a newer agent, you know, sometimes we give you a little bit of a pass, although we shouldn't. But, you know, there's seasoned agents that have closed a lot of transactions that I don't know that they've read the contract recently. So
And
same
they
thing.
make a lot, you make a lot of money, guys. You really do on a transaction. And if you had an attorney that you had prepared a contract for you, who was representing you, would you just, and he said, sign it, would you not want to know what's in the contract and have that attorney be able to explain what's in that contract? Because you're spending a lot of money, and so are your clients. So be prepared. Make sure that you set the scene correctly for any inspection, especially a home inspection, because that is one that definitely blow your deal. If you've got a question and they've got a question, make sure you know what the answer is going to be. You know, be prepared with some recommendations and some options, and don't let the drama take over, because that's where it's an emotional thing very often. So don't approach it as a business, and be a professional about it, is what I wanted to tell you, because this is a very important element and of a transaction.
Yeah, drama-free helps. Hey, Derek, why don't you jump in, and then Gary, we'll let you close us out.
How you doing, Lance? Just a couple quick questions. When you put up the reports from the roof and the right here, the one with the wood destroying pests and organism inspection report, okay, and you've got items that say you've got active wood destroying things.
Yep.
Say you're a buyer's agent. Are you gonna talk with the your client and tell them, hey, let's head for the hills. This one's, you know, this one's gonna fall. And then the second question, are you in with a clipboard, you know, shoulder to shoulder with the inspector, you know, watching and you know, kind of checking things out?
Yeah, well, those are great questions. I'll take the first one, and I'll let Vicky take the second. Okay, so I looking at this termite report, and there's a whole bunch of items on there. And if I heard you correctly, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. We have active infestation. Do we head for the hills? This looks like a problem. I would suggest that the answer to that in most cases is probably no. You're not heading for the hills. And don't let the length of a report necessarily scare you. Sometimes, you know, you'll have a 20-page inspection report on a termite, for example. There's 11 findings on here, but they're all basically the same thing. And these findings are basically, guess what? You've got drywood termites. You need to fumigate it. And it's not unusual when you have drywood termites to have them all over the place. They're in the attic, they're in the bedroom, they're here, they're here, they're here. The report looks, oh my gosh, the world is ending here. But the reality is there's a solution to that. And the solution in that particular case is a fumigation and probably some wood replacement. So having said that, that's really the first or second kind of option you gave is, oh my gosh, this is too much. Shall we head for the hills? Well, that's kind of the point of these inspections, not to head to the hills, but it gives the buyer the opportunity to sit back and say, oh, this is way more than I expected. I was not prepared for all of these items. And this, of course, gives them the opportunity to exercise their right to, exercise their right to remove themselves from the transactions. I'm exercising my contingency. But I would suggest that the default answer is not this is a deal killer. I think the default answer is, okay, is there an opportunity to work with the seller and get these items corrected? And I think most times, even the ones that are difficult and you pull your hair out as agents, most of the time you figure it out. Because at the end of the day, money solves pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So, yep. Okay, the second question was, are we following these inspectors around with the clipboard? Vicky, do you follow?
Yeah. And I just want to say, hey, guys, you're problem solvers. First you hit it head on, you get the facts, you get what information that seller needs to make an informed decision. So you get the facts, you give it to the seller, and it's the seller's decision. But you're a part of trying to get the problem solved. Are you following them around? If you want to know for your own edification or information that, what the inspector, but I let the inspectors, they don't do my job and I don't do their job. That's what they do. They're certified, they're licensed, or that's their career and they're trained. So I don't follow them around very often unless they want to point something out to me, then I'll be there to look at it. But otherwise, they're the experts in those fields. I just want the report and an explanation so I know how to go explain it to my seller or my buyer, whichever one.
And Derek, and I'll put a cap on that, and then we'll let Gary do one more comment and we'll close it. I think you will find agents who feel very strongly on both sides of those. I am not an agent with my 30 plus years of experience. We just sold a whole bunch of hedge fund properties, and there was inspections beyond inspections. And the reality was, we as a listing team attended very few of those inspections. We did not attend many of those inspections. Now, did we look at the reports and read the reports? We absolutely did. Now, there are agents right now on this call that might say, oh my gosh, Matt, shame on you. You should be attending every single one of those and follow. So there is certainly a camp of what the best practice is, attend them all or not. But I would suggest at a minimum, especially if you're a newer agent, you absolutely need to get out in the field. If for no other reasons, you want to learn what's going on. You want to attend some home inspections. You want to maybe attend some termite inspections. You want to see what's going on. So what are these guys doing? What is this? Okay. Now you may choose not to attend everyone after that. And then a lot of times I think your client will dictate it. I will tell you, if I have a needy client, buyer or seller, and their expectation is you're going to be at these inspections, then guess what? Then the question is answered. I'm at these inspections. Okay. But I'm not necessarily following them around with the clipboard. I'm there, I'm observing, I'm there if there's some questions.
Right.
And I will tell you this though, if you're representing the buyer and your buyer is intending on attending the home inspection with the inspector, I strongly suggest you attend with them. Okay.
No, I think the policy, Lance, should be that you do on home inspections. I was talking about the termite and some of the other ones. No, I don't, go in and follow them around, but the home inspector, I am at the property with the home inspector. It's really your job. You're getting paid to be there, but you don't need to follow them around. You just let them do their job, and then they will point out what issues they think that they're important that the seller or the buyer know.
Okay, we've gone 10 minutes over. Gary, you were unmuted, you remuted. You want to jump back in and close us out? Gary, 1,000.
Yes, here.
All right.
With the market the way it is, I have clients that are willing to waive a physical inspection, waive the contingency of an appraisal, and I am dead set against doing that. But a lot of times they think it gives them an advantage. But boy, I said, you're exposing yourself, and I want to protect myself as much as possible. I want something in writing that you're going against my advice.
Yeah, for sure. And I get that. I totally get that. And honestly, I did that. But I bought a house last summer. My wife Julie and I bought a house in Canyon Crest. And the market, quite honestly, was not as competitive back as in June. It was competitive, but not as competitive as it is today. But I came in, I waived everything. I waived it all. But do I have a little different level of knowledge and a little level, I'm not, the termite inspection is not going to scare me. Okay.
Mhm.
Home inspection is not going to scare me, but is there risk associated with that? Damn right. There's risk. So we all got to be careful. So I think generally, Gary, I agree. If you have buyers that are, this is, and again, we could go down a rabbit hole, but let's just do a quick one. There's a lot of agents out there right now that are writing offers well above list price and removing appraisal contingencies and committing their buyer to pay, well, hey, we'll pay, $20,000 above the appraised value, or whatever it is. You insert your set of facts there. I understand that. I get that. And I might even recommend that. But I got to tell you, if that's happening, I'm having a face-to-face, hard look in the eye conversation with that client and then making sure they understand what that means. Are you really prepared to pay 20 grand more above appraisal? Or are you really prepared to pay whatever it is, regardless of the appraisal? Because if you're not, then we need to stop this nonsense right now. So yeah, good advice, Gary. Good advice. Okay, guys, I could go for days. I just can't shut up. So anyway, hopefully you guys got some value out of that. And
Because we're passionate, Lance.
we like this stuff. So, okay, guys,
All right.
go sell something. All right, get off the Zoom. I want you guys to go out and list a house or sell a house. You're not allowed to stop working today without a contract signed.
Still
Okay,
listening.
that's right. Go get them.
All right.